He is a student of the game, but through years and years of broadcasting, writing, and as a book author, he's become a mentor to many across the nation who have chosen journalism and media in college athletics. We got Tony Barnhart on the line. We appreciate him stopping by. Tony, thank you so much for being here. So Tony has worked, of course, at ESPN, so much work on the SEC network in recent years, CBS Sports as well. There you see some of his other destinations here, SEC Radio there in Nashville. Tony wanted to talk about the landscape of college football, first and foremost. We're in changing times right now. And, you know, on one hand, this consolidation of teams into these four conferences creates some crazy good matchups for fans to get a taste of Ohio State and Oregon or Texas, LSU, those kind of matchups that we're going to see now on a more regular basis. So in terms of on the field product, it seems to be an improvement. But for those of us who cherish the fabric of the sport, you know, the flavor of the food, the way people talk a little differently in different aspects of the country, different portions of the country, different lifestyles, that the clashing of the conferences was always an integral part of the game and an intriguing part of the game. And that, to a certain extent, when the Big Ten stretches from coast to coast and the SEC has gone into the Midwest in Oklahoma and Missouri, seems to have been lost. Where do you stand on that?
I'm good with it. I think I've always felt this way, Mark, is that college football is the most resilient sport of any sport. They always find a way to come out of it doing well. I am harking back to the day of John McKay, the old USC coach, great coach, and they changed the rules for recruiting that knocked down the number of scholarships from 105 to 95. And John McKay walked into the room where the decision was made and said, "Gentlemen, congratulations, you have just destroyed college football." There have always been stuff about the demise of it. I just think I think the 12-team playoff is going to be incredibly exciting, and it is going to really change the way that we consume college football. More teams are going to be involved. More games are going to be meaningful when we get to November. I mean, let's face it, when we get to November with a 14 playoff, we're talking 7, maybe 8 teams with a legitimate chance to make it. Now with 12 teams, you're talking 20, 25 teams that absolutely have a legitimate shot to make it. And I think that's going to bring more interest to the game, particularly when we get into November.
And I think another famous response to the scholarship expansion or reduction was Bear Bryant, who you would probably understand and have a deeper knowledge of his reaction, and kind of the ramification was, instead of being able to then recruit and sign players just to keep them away from Auburn and other rivals, then it spread the wealth out, and other SEC schools could benefit from the talent that he would typically scarf up.
That's exactly right. Coaches do not like change. I think all of us who've been in the business a while can appreciate that, because they don't have control, and coaches can't stand it when they're not in control. We're going through a period now. You know what? Coaches are not as in bigger control as they used to be, because the players, this is the time for the players, where the players are going to get financially compensated, where they're going to have freedom of movement that they haven't had before. But again, for people who are fretting over this, saying it's going to destroy the game, college football is so resilient. Even we adults who try to mess it up, we can't do it. It's more resilient than we are.
We got Tony Barnhart here, longtime ESPN, CBS Sports in the past. You can catch him there on 104.5 The Zone in Nashville. Now that everyone's getting ready for week 0, Tony, and week 1, we want to make sure that everyone knows where to find you. Are you going to be on the SEC Network's pregame show?
No, I will not. But where I'm going to be this fall, a couple of things. Obviously, I do a radio show every week for my friends, Doug Matthews at 105.5 The Zone in Nashville. Doug and I have been doing this for a long, long time. I do that every week. My old newspaper buddies and I have a website, TMG College Sports, where we all get to write and home to write. and I do a lot of speaking. August has been the busiest month. I think this August has been the busiest month I've ever had. But TMG and obviously social media. I'm on Twitter at Mr. CFB.
There it is. It's all right there on the banner, folks. Follow Tony. It will make you a smarter college football fan for sure. And Tony, since you brought up change and I brought up Bear Bryant, why don't we go to the transition in Alabama with Kalen DeBoer? Of course, Nick Saban, nobody's going to discount. I will say arguably the greatest of all time. I think that's just maybe a technicality that I try to preface that in naming anybody the greatest of all time, because that's a difficult 100% consensus to make, but it's pretty much affirmed by just about everyone. So Kalen DeBoer comes into a situation in Nick Saban's shadow. He seems very comfortable, confident. I know you've had conversations with him. And at the same time, it seems like for a team that's ranked number 5 in the preseason, that has all this talent, has a head coach who has proven with less talent that he can take a team to a national championship game, that people are just discarding Alabama.
Well, they shouldn't. They do so at their own peril, because first of all, Alabama has a lot of really good players, okay? And they still have a lot of really good players. Obviously, they lose a generational coach, the greatest coach of all time. But in my conversations with Kalen DeBoer, he impresses me as a guy who's very comfortable in his own skin. He understands who he is. He's won at every level he's ever been. Did a tremendous job at Washington, Rose Bowl, and the playoffs. And so I think Alabama's going to be fine. Now, having said that, I've got Georgia, Texas, and Alabama for my finish in the SEC, and I think that's the way it's going to go. But I would not try this, Mark. Let's talk again after September 18th when Georgia goes to Alabama. We will be a lot smarter after that game.
I was doing my best to make predictions and unveiled those last night, and that always is a struggle for me to think, okay, people are going to scrutinize these predictions, but they're out there, and it's a long shot to try to pick these teams for the playoffs and so forth, although we've got a pretty good handle at being 12 instead of 4. So dark horses in the SEC, there seems to be this layer of teams that are really intriguing. And I would like to know from you who you find the most interesting out of the likes of, the Tennessees and the Texas A&Ms and the LSUs.
Right. One of the cool things is I mentioned those 3 schools at the top of the SEC. And then after that, you got about 7 or 8 schools that could easily finish 4th. Is it Ole Miss? Probably the best wide receiver room in college football, great quarterback in Jackson Dart. Is it Ole Miss at number 4? Is it LSU, who's going to be, oh, by the way, yeah, they lost the Heisman Trophy winner, but I promise you, they're going to be really, really good on offense. Their defense was horrible. All they got to do is be bad. If they're not horrible on defense, they've got a chance. Is it Missouri with the players they've got coming back? Can Coach Drink do it 2 years in a row? I just think there's a bunch of teams that could fill that 4th spot, and it's going to be fun watching them because, Texas A&M. I think people are overlooking Texas A&M with Mike Elko coming in and really rebuilding that program, and it's a totally different mindset at Texas A&M. And oh, by the way, they open at home against Notre Dame, so it's going to be so much fun watching all these teams who have a chance to finish in one of those top spots.
It grabs my attention when I see Mike Elko take the same team that had lost, I believe, 15 out of 16 of its final ACC games and take that exact same roster and go 9-4 and then 8-5. It's just remarkable, and be a drive away from playing in the ACC championship game 2 years ago. I think that was the best coaching hire of the off season. Of course, Oklahoma, Texas, ton of attention on that situation. And this intrigue by the Big 12 fan base in probably rooting for them to go, for as much as they hate Oklahoma and Texas for leaving their conference, wanting them to prove, okay, we're actually better than you think we were because they were able to jump in your league and be successful. And then, of course, I got to think that there's a staunch SEC core that you always want to see the newcomers have to kind of, prove themselves and gain their stripes before they start to succeed. So how do you think that transition is going to work out for both of those schools?
Well, first of all, you got two of the iconic brands in the history of the game joining your conference, and you didn't have to stretch across from sea to shining sea to have it. You got 16 teams in contiguous states, as Commissioner Sankey would say, and so that's good as well. And but what coaches have told me is that the issue is not, say, Oklahoma playing Alabama, and can Oklahoma compete with Alabama? Of course they can. The issue, or the question is, can you play Alabama this week and LSU next week and Texas A&M the following week and Georgia the following week? It's a cumulative effect. And that's why the coaches have to learn they have to have depth in this league if they're going to survive November. And that's, to me, that's going to be the key adjustment that both OU and Texas have to make.
So, Tony, I want to continue the conversation on SEC scheduling in Oklahoma and Texas in particular, but we certainly want to make sure that people are aware of the book that you've released, The 19 of Green, and we'll give everyone here a snapshot of it, but just give us a taste of what this book is about.
In the fall of 1970, I was a senior at Greene County High School in Greensboro, Georgia. It's exactly halfway between Atlanta and Augusta on I-20. And that year, the courts ruled that we would, after dragging it out, we would fully integrate the schools. We had a white school, Greene County High School. We had a black school, Floyd T. Corey High. And the court said, you will merge. Because one guy said, you know what? You haven't really integrated the schools, so you integrate the football team. And I said, okay. And so it fell upon only 19 of us came out of spring practice, 12 white, 7 black. And we went about the business of putting together a team that played for a region championship, and I put this book together. There are 15 of us still alive. I interviewed all the players, all the living coaches, townspeople, faculty, and all that about what that time was like. Because at the end of the day, we had a really good football season, but this book is not about football. It's about the fact that when you look at the cover, you see number 11, Charles Turner, our quarterback, who came from Floyd T. Corey. Today, 54 years after we played our last game together, Charles and I are still very, very close friends. I talked to him yesterday, as a matter of fact. And so it's about the story of relationships and what I learned going through this process. It was a tremendous labor of love to go through it, but I learned a lot even at my age. I'm 71 years old now, and what I learned about that time and those relationships when I was researching the book. I've been very lucky in my career, and I had a lot of neat things come my way, but this book by far, for me personally, is the best thing I've ever done.
That's phenomenal. That is really groundbreaking. And what it makes me think of, and it sounds like you've had maybe a similar experience in that I love the game of football. I love the stats. I love memorizing all that stuff. But as you grow older, it becomes less about the games on the field and more about the relationships. Exactly. How can we use this to better society, bring people together, do those sorts of things?
Well, one of the things I close out my talks with when we're talking about the book is the fact that doing the research, I found something that should have been obvious to me when I was a student a million years ago. And it's this: we the white students at the school did not think for 1 minute about, we got to stay in our high school. The black students came to our school and merged with our school. And so as a result, I got to graduate from Greene County High School, which is what my plan, all along. But the African-American kids did not get to graduate from Floyd T. Corey. And basically we asked them to give up their senior year so that we could make this thing work and do what had to be done from an integration standpoint. And that has touched me. And I realized there's a lot of lessons that I learned even at my age. And that was one of them. The other one is what everybody knows, that we've come a long way in race relationships since 1970, but we've still got a long way to go.
Absolutely. And it brings up something that's related. I'm going to get us back to the field, but it's connected to 1970 in particular as a targeted date, but it's somewhat random because obviously college football did not integrate all at the same time. It wasn't a Jackie Robinson moment in college football. And we're wrapped up, especially in the offseason, with all these arguments about the all-time best. Who's the all-time best? Is it Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State? Who is it? When do you start legitimizing giving legitimacy to the results? Does a national championship in 1901 really matter when you're playing club teams and the forward pass is outlawed and all those things? At what point does it count? When is modern college football post World War II, or when does that start? And people jump on me because I'm big into the metrics and I'm big into counting those sorts of things and looking at, okay, this is the playoff era. This is the 21st century. This is 1970. This is post World War II. All those things and dividing those into categories, where I see a lot of people making arbitrary claims that, okay, 1980, that's when major college football and recent college football, modern college football started. And there's nothing magical about 1980, of course. The same games were being played in 1979. But I have latched on to the year, Tony, 1970, as, again, not an exact year, but as a approximation of when 70% of the NFL players are African American, and most of those players were not allowed to play major college football in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And again, it was a gradual situation that everything post 1970, because of that in and of itself, I think bring us the most legitimate numbers on the field and results on the field.
I think that's a really good point, because 1970 was it Georgia did not sign an African American football player until the fall of 1971. Everybody was waiting on Bear Bryant to make the first move, and he did. But the game, we have to admit that the game has changed dramatically since, if you want to call this the integrated era or whatever you want to call it. There's a huge difference. You go back and look at Georgia football history, Alabama football history. Bear Bryant was winning these national championships in 64, 65 with all white teams and guys that barely got to 200 pounds. So there's no question that the era of the integration era is a significant line of demarcation for college football.
So when we look at the current situation, I did an analysis the other day, and I don't think in any way that the SEC favors anyone. I just think with all the greatness of the SEC, and this has been the premier conference, not just on the field, but in being a visionary conference, implementing a national conference championship before anyone else. And we could cite all sorts of innovations to the game that the SEC has led and been ahead of the curve on. But when it comes to scheduling, ever since this conference split into two divisions and had this cross rivalry setup, which makes all the sense in the world when it's Auburn and Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee, but I didn't think that those other games needed to be played. You know, what two schools have less to do with each other in the SEC than South Carolina and Texas A&M? Why do they need to play every year, for example? So now we're in a different era of scheduling. Nick Saban was one to say we should go to 9 games. But I looked at Oklahoma and Texas in particular, Tony, and the disparity of the schedule is incredible. The SEC opponents that Oklahoma is playing this season went 36-20 in the conference last year, and Texas's composite opponents went 19-37. If you took a list, as we did in the video that we posted, and rated the difficulty of games within the conference top to bottom for these two teams, I don't think there's any question Texas's second most difficult games, a game at Texas A&M, and Oklahoma's arguably second easiest game is Tennessee. And you could debate that Tennessee's better than Texas A&M. There's just not. Do you think something should be done to make these games, or I'm sorry, these schedules more equitable, number one? And number two, do you like the thought of a 9-game SEC schedule?
Well, let's start with the schedule for first. I like the new scheduling model, and here's why. I thought it was well. Here's the perfect example. Texas A&M joined the SEC in what 2014, 2012,
12.
2012. All right. The University of Georgia has yet to go to College Station, Texas. All right. And that's one of the things I did not like about the schedule is teams did not play each other. When you had divisional play, you basically play and you had a divisional play. You played the 16 other teams in your division, and you played one permanent opponent. In the case of Georgia, it was Auburn. And then you had one team to rotate. Well, I didn't like that because it took forever to play everybody. The new scheduling model, in 2 years, you will play everybody. And in 4 years, you will play everybody home and away. And to me, whatever, if it makes the schedules out of balance, I'm not as concerned about that as I am much about the teams actually playing each other. For example, Georgia's on the road this year at Ole Miss, at Alabama, at Texas, at Kentucky. All right, those are their 4 SEC road games. Next year, those 4 teams all come to Athens. So you do play teams much more often. But I just think this was something that Nick Saban always said. Everybody should play everybody. And if you bring a guy to campus, he should know that if he stays 4 years, he will play every team in the SEC home and away. And to me, that is the overriding force that I put stock in.
Tony Barnhart, ESPN, and of course, as we noted, he's got a writers group there together as a columnist for TMG College Sports. And so check that out, of course, and SEC Radio at 104.5 The Zone in Nashville. Last thing for you, Tony, would be in terms of the power struggle in this sport. I'm speaking of the Big Ten and the SEC. The SEC has been the best conference, and there are so many detractors out there that I debate with almost every day. And I understand we could debate whether it's been overblown, what the dominance is, but there's no question it's been the best conference. It's not really debatable for 15 plus years, probably more like 20 to 25. But the Big Ten has bulked up, in a sense, matched or surpassed the SEC editions of Oklahoma and Texas with those 4. How do you see this playing out? Because these are obviously the 2 that rule the sport. And if anything, I'll just bring one other stat to light that other people listening may not be aware of, that unless you may correct me on this point, there's always been, when there was Power 5 conferences, everything that they went into agreement on was an equal distribution. They were equal partners in everything. And now we've gotten to a place where the SEC and the Big Ten can demand that they get an unequal share of TV revenue from the college football playoff. Well, they've got the brands that are going to bring the viewers. And so we've gotten to this place where there's this big 2 rulership of the sport. So do you think that's a good place to be? And how do you see that possibly playing out?
I just think the way it's going to play out is the SEC and the Big Ten are going to dominate the landscape, particularly when it comes to contracts and things of that nature. And I don't think there's a whole lot they can do about it. I just think look, the ACC, and let's be candid about it, the ACC and the Big 12 are just happy to be at the party. Okay. And maybe the hope is that time goes on, they'll be able to do television deals that'll make the disparity in income a little less obvious. I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I just think the SEC and the Big Ten are sitting in this position. They said, okay, as long as we're fine playing with these other 2 conferences and having that structure, as long as we get to do what we want to do. We have the most eyeballs on TV sets. We have the most resources. And to me, I hate to say it this way, but that's just simply the way it's going to be. And if pressure ever comes to bear on the SEC, they said, fine, we'll get our own 22-team league and 24-team league, and we'll be off and running because they've got more people watch the SEC and the Big Ten than anybody else, and that's a fact.
I thought the 2020 pandemic season, I thought that was the telling tale of where the power structure lies in this sport and how the sports run. All 4 5 conferences at that time. They all did whatever they wanted. There's no connection between the 5 other than they've agreed upon playing bowl games and postseason games and playoff games. But other than that, the SEC took the lead to say, we want our players and personnel to be protected. We're going to look out for their safety, but we are looking for a way to play football.
Exactly.
We are pushing to play football, where the Pac-12 was the complete opposite. I thought the ACC and the Big 12, once they got the lead from the SEC, was like, okay, we're going to do what they're going to do because they're showing the way.
Exactly.
And then the Big 10 was, to me, the most intriguing because you had this gulf between the administrators and the academia that said, no, we're not playing. And then, but the groundswell of coaches, players, fans that were like, we are playing. It's football. And this is the Big 10. Football is important to us. We're playing. And so there was the biggest, contention there in the Big 10. So that really, I think, told us a lot about the way the sports run.
Well, the SEC was, you got to give Greg Sankey, the commissioner, a lot of credit. His argument the whole time was, it's not time to make, we don't have to make this decision now. We need to keep researching, doing studies, gathering data, doing all those things. The SEC did an incredible amount of research on how the virus spread and things of that nature. The Big 10, they threw up their hands and go, this scares us, and so we're not going to play. SEC said, we got to be a little more diligent than that. And I've always given Commissioner Sankey and his staff a lot of credit for putting the data together that said, okay, if we do this, we can play. And we think the game means that much to our fan base, to our folks, that we need to make every effort possible to make the game as safe as it can be. And you saw how it turned out. Everybody played a 10-game conference schedule, and people loved it, and it ended up being a very, very good season.
There was a time there where I thought the SEC might be the only one playing college football, and they may say, hey, we will be the sport for this season, and our champion wins it 80% of the time anyway. So we'll probably be legitimized as the national champion anyway.
The SEC was completely prepared to go off on its own and play their season, play their 10-game conference schedule, play their conference championship game, and then maybe put something together for a national playoff. But I found it very fascinating that when the SEC said, here's what we're going to do, it didn't take that long for the Big 10 to come back to the table.
Tony Barnhart, as you see right there, columnist for TMG College Sports, SEC radio show on 104.5 The Zone Nashville. And again, the book that is out on the market right now, a number of places you can get it, Amazon included. Anywhere else, Tony, you want to highlight in regards to the book's availability, The 19 of Green?
Making some bookstore, some book signing stops. We are in Noonan, Georgia tomorrow doing a charity event. Monday night, I'll be in Memphis for the Memphis Touchdown Club at the Hilton. That is open to the public. And if you're in Memphis, come by and see us. But the best way to get the book is, if I'm not in your town, the best way to get the book is through Amazon. Just do a search on Amazon for the 19 of Green.
Folks, that was exactly what we did right there. So you saw the shot right there. I just went to Amazon, The 19 of Green with an E at the end, pops right up. There you go. Tony Barnhart, sir, it's been a pleasure and an honor to speak to you about college football. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for making time.
Mark, I appreciate it. It's good to be with you.